And courtesy to others, if you have a mobile phone, would you mind turning it to silent, please? One thing we did back in the 1996 rules, the President of ISAF came to us about 1992 and said, would you please try and simplify these rules? It's all too difficult for us sailors to understand. He said, something like the 10 Commandments. I said, I'll do better than that, Paul. I'll give you 4. And he looked at me. He said, how can you do that? I said, pretty easy. And these are my 4 commandments. Sorry, I'm going backwards now. These are my 4 commandments. And we'll cover them in detail in a short while. Rule 10, important to start with. 11, boats that are overlap. 12, boats that are clear astern. And 13, a boat that is tacking. You get nothing else out of tonight other than remembering those 4 commandments. Right? And I've done my job. Because what happens with the rest of the right-of-way rules is that they place limitations on the boats in those 4 rules that have right-of-way. And that's all it is. It's really that simple. Okay. Something we did that we now encourage people to do is to read the bit in italics at the start of each section of the racing rules. And part 2, which is the right-of-way rules, they have things in italics that are pretty important to us. Because part 2 apply between boats that are sailing in or near the racing area and intend to race, are racing or have been racing. So that doesn't necessarily mean you can't be penalised as soon as you cross the finishing line or you haven't even got to the start line yet. If you intend to race, are racing or have been racing, you're amenable to the racing rules and amenable to the licence that this club holds on your behalf to conduct boat races. And when a boat racing under these rules meets a vessel that is not, you comply with the regs, as we've already been explained. There are times when sailing at night, for example, we might use the regs right-of-way rules rather than the ISAF right-of-way rules. I'm trying to encourage that not to happen. I think now, the way we have our rules, we're keeping boats further apart than we used to. And I think there's enough in there now that we can actually conduct our sailing races at night time under the sailing rules. You can't go around a mark, for example, under the regs. Right? So it's a bit hard going around Bird Island at times if you've got other boats in the line. So that's something, that's just my commercial, or one of my commercials. You'll probably hear a bit more than that. Another thing we did was we said, what sort of a game do we want to play? And we've never been laid out before. So we've said we're governed by a body of rules that we're expected to follow and enforce. Now that's my emphasis in the bold, not the rule emphasis. But what we're asking for is for people to not only follow the rules, but help us enforce them. We don't have referees or umpires with whistles in most of the sailing we do. Some of it we have, but not all of it. So what we're saying is protest in our sport is not a dirty word. We are expected under that basic principle to follow and enforce the rules. So, basic principles. This is a new one that the Do Good Police have put in. Encouraged to minimise any adverse environmental impacts of the sport. And a new rule, just to make it real good, the competitor shall not intentionally put trash in the water. So next time you drop the winch handle in the water, make sure you go back and pick it up. Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay. A boat and a owner shall compete in compliance with recognised principles of sportsmanship and fair play. You might say that's common sense, but the problem with common sense is it's not all that common. A boat may be penalised under this rule only if it is clearly established that these principles have been violated. And if you're in a series of disqualification under this rule, cannot be excluded from your serious score. So it's a pretty nasty sort of a rule, but it only acts, as it says, if it's a pretty nasty sort of situation and nothing else applies. The other thing we decided when we rewrote these rules and tried to simplify them is that we were not a contact sport. And yet every weekend out there there's contact, isn't there? Eh? So, a boat shall avoid contact with another boat if reasonably possible. Now sometimes it's not. You're put in a position or a situation where you just can't escape. But a right-of-way boat, or one entitled a room or marked room, need not act to avoid contact until it's clear the other boat is not keeping clear or giving room or marked room. So there's an out for the right-of-way boat. But that doesn't mean that he can just carry on regardless. Because if she breaks the rule and contact does not cause damage or injury, she shall be exonerated. The exonerated in red means it's new. And we used to say something different, and what we're trying to do now, generally among the rules, is to make self-exoneration more acceptable, rather than go to the room to be proven that, yeah, okay, you broke a rule but someone else forced you into breaking it. What we're now trying to do is encourage the rules themselves encourage you to say, okay, I'm excused from having to do anything because the other guy broke the rule and he's taken his turns, therefore I'm happy and don't have to go on with it. But if there's damage or injury, right, that's not the case. You have to go to the room. Or, if it's serious, indeed, you shall retire if there's serious damage or bad injuries. Now, a few Sydney Harbour boats ago, we had 2 incidents at the start before we got to the heads. And both boats that were involved in the incident carried on. The other 2 boats that were injured and that were damaged in the incident had to come back to port because they couldn't get out the heads. Their damage was so bad. So under the rules, when we got to Hobart, we said to them, okay, you sure you want to go on with this braidhead? Oh yes, we want to go on with the braidhead. So it turned out that when we established that they were in the wrong, we had to retire them because the rule says if you cause damage, serious damage or injury, then you shall retire. So we had to retire them. Not a pleasant thing to do, but that's how it is. So avoiding contact, we're not a contact sport. Throughout the rule book, we use words to simplify things by only using one word or a term. And that's called a definition. The definition is shown in the rule book in italics. Right? So anything that's in italics, apart from that preamble bits in front of all the rules, in the rule itself that's in italics means it's a definition, and it's therefore you'll find it in the definitions. We don't now have tack or jibe or close haul or luffing as a defined term. I mean, the tacking one in years gone by was really a bit silly because most of us, when we're racing or sailing, we say, okay, we're ready to tack, guys, ready, okay, we're about to tack, ready, here we go, bang, and the tiller goes over or the wheel goes over or whatever. And everyone thinks we're tacking from that moment. But the old definition said, no, you're only tacking from the moment you went beyond head to wind until you're on a close haul course, which is bloody silly. Anyway, we've fixed that. We're now covered in a rule 13. So just watch out for the defined terms and the definition. And we'll just run through a couple of them that are used fairly often throughout the rules. The definition of room, the space a boat needs in the existing conditions, including space to comply with obligations under rules of Part 2, which is the right-of-way rule. Rule 31, we'll get to that later on, while manoeuvring properly in a seaman-like way. What we were trying to do when we wrote this was we tried to get 2 things involved within that definition, time and space. But we also wanted to make it safe, and that's why the seaman-like came into it. So a crash tag is not a seaman-like manoeuvre. So what we say is space, that's one of the things we need. A boat needs in the existing condition. Now that will change from weather conditions to sea conditions to all sorts of funny things. So in the existing conditions is important. To comply with her obligations under the right-of-way rules and Rule 31. Promptly, quickly, in a seaman-like way. No crash tags. The definition of rule, and I won't read all of that, but we've covered all things that are applicable to sailing, right, in the definition. So now class rules and all those other things that we used to have to write a whole story of in the front few lines of the sailing instructions are now all covered in the definition of rule. Keep clear. A boat keeps clear of a right-of-way boat if the right-of-way boat can sail her course with no need to take avoiding action. Again, that little green star thingy means that there's been a change to that rule. Made no significant change to what it means at all. So we don't even worry too much about it, which is why the star's only a little one. And when the boats are overlapped, if the right-of-way boat can also change course in both directions without immediately making contact. When we were drawing the rules up, what we talked about was we wanted to give the boat wiggle room. So a leeward boat had to have wiggle room, and if he didn't have wiggle room, the windward boat wasn't keeping clear. And then we had to try and write that idea in a word, and they're the sort of words that we came up with. So when boats are overlapped, if the right-of-way boat, so the leeward boat in my scenario, can also change course in both directions, up and down, without immediately making contact. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to follow. This is a fairly complicated definition because we've incorporated a few words into the one definition. And that's clear astern, clear ahead and overlap. So one boat is clear astern and another when our hull and equipment in normal position. So if we can get out Rule 12 here and see that there's a line through the aftermost point of the green boat and the red boat is behind that line. Whereas in Rule 11, they are overlapped and therefore that definition is what counts. The other boat is clear ahead, elementary dead Watson. They overlap when neither is clear astern. However, they also overlap when a boat between them overlaps both. So there are times when you're sailing downhill particularly, where the guy in the middle, right, even though you may be clear astern at this one, the guy in the middle can create an overlap for both of you. These terms always apply to boats on the same tack. They do not apply to boats on opposite tacks. Unless Rule 18, which is rounding marks, applies, or both boats are sailing more than 90 degrees from the true wind. We had, under the Albert rules, we had a scenario where when you approached the rounding mark, suddenly it was not important whether you were overlapped or not when you were sailing downwind. Because once a boat reached the zone, right, the other guy was, say, clear astern, then this guy had his right to go round. But even though they were on opposite tacks, and they had reached the zone, or one of them reached the zone, then what happened was that suddenly it didn't matter that they were port and starboard anymore. The boats that were inside boat was entitled to room at the mark. So we fixed that by bringing this last sentence into this definition. Do not apply to boats on opposite tacks unless Rule 18 applies, or boats are sailing more than 90 degrees from the true wind. Simplified the game immensely. Here's another bit of this in italics in the front part of the section of the rule. A boat is right away over another when the other boat is required to keep clear of her. Okay? And this is the bit I mentioned in the opening, talking about my commandments. Some rules in sections B, C and D limit the actions of a right-of-way boat. So that's all they do. But they only limit the actions of a right-of-way boat. So that's from Rule 15 on. That's the limit, or 14 on. That's the limitation on the right-of-way boat. Okay? That's all it is. So for example, here we have just a diagram like put on the board. We can use the same colour boats, clever, wasn't it? Okay? So they are overlapped, but they are still port and starboard. And if they're out in the middle of the racetrack, it's straight port and starboard. Okay? It's not important until they get into that dark running area. Two. Remember that wiggle room. What's happened here is that the yellow boat has closed down too far onto the leeward boat and is not kept clear. Because the blue boat has no wiggle room. Right? Remember, we're limiting the actions of the right-of-way boat. So windward boat has to keep clear, and what he should have done was back here at position 3 or thereabouts. Should have taken action earlier to have avoided the leeward boat. So windward boat, not keeping clear, basic principle, one of the commandments. Here's an interesting one. Now that we don't have a definition of jibe, right, we've got a sudden change in who's right and who's got right away and who hasn't. In the first two, we've got straight windward and leeward. Right, so windward boat has to keep clear of the leeward boat. But suddenly it's changed, and it's now port and starboard at position 3. So when what was the windward boat changes course, right, changes tack when she jives, now starboard tack, she's got right away. So that's where that transition, and we'll get to Rule 15 in a little while, that transition says that if you do that, you've got to allow the other boat room to keep clear of you, because you're now got rights that you didn't have a second or so ago. That's why in some of the match races you'll see them going, throwing booms across from one side or the other constantly, trying to keep breaking up who's right and who's got right away and who hasn't. Okay. On to the commandments. I'm told that last season 2/3 of the protests in and around Sydney Harbour were on this rule. It's the simplest rule in the book. It means what it says. And it says the port tack yacht shall keep clear of the starboard tack yacht. Very difficult to do, isn't it? I mean to say, bloody hell. The word shall means what it says. And indeed, in my theory, not only shall you do what it says, but if you come before me in a protest hearing, right, you've got to prove that you did. That makes it a bit different. I mean, the greatest sailor I think we've seen is Paul Elstrom. And this is just to show how difficult it is to prove at times that you did what the rule says. 1976 Olympics, in the first 5 races, Paul was disqualified twice for mark rounding infringements that he couldn't prove that he had an overlap or didn't have an overlap, or whatever the case may be. And unless you've got a blimp following you around the course, there are times when it's very hard to prove that you did or didn't do what the rule said you should have done. Helicopters are all right, but they move too quickly. And we found in Fremantle in the 87 America's Cups that Bondi's blimps were fantastic. We could watch the tracks of the boats, we can analyse the tracks of the boats. They're fantastic. So unless you've got a blimp, if in doubt, don't. Right? If there's any doubt that you're going to keep clear, get the hell out of it. Because, boy, it's hard to prove at times. 2/3 of the protests about that one simple rule. Another simple one. When boats are on the same tack and overlap, the windward boat shall keep clear of a leeward boat. Again, there's that word, shall. And we know what keep clear means because we've talked about it. Alright? Simple. Same tack, not overlap. I know the colleagues still talk about overtaking boat, but we got rid of that back in about 1958. Because it got too difficult to establish who was overtaking who. Remember, the colleagues are written with keeping vessels apart so that there's to reduce the risk of collision. When we write racing rules, we understand that you guys are going to get closer than you ever will in a normal colleague scenario. But we're still writing the rules to try and avoid collision. That's the prime reason for them. So, having done that, what's got to happen is a boat clear astern shall keep clear of a boat clear ahead. So you might be overtaking, you might be coming faster in this scenario and quicker and all that stuff. But when you're a boat clear astern, you'll keep clear of a boat clear ahead. Third, this is my toy and I can't screw it up. So. After a boat passes head to wind, she shall keep clear of other boats until she's on a close hauled course. Remember the words, on a close hauled course. Because until you're on a close hauled course, you've not completed your tack. So assuming the wind's coming down the screen, when you get to there, until you get to there, just before hitting the wind, you are luffing. And you are still on, in this case, port tack. The moment you go beyond head to wind, you're subject to Rule 13. Until you're on a close haul course. Now that's usually when it's a tight scenario, when somebody screws up and the jib sheet gets caught or the forward end falls overboard or something simple and easy and all that sort of stuff. But during that time, Rules 10, 11 and 12 do not apply. So they're switches that we wrote into the rules. We said, okay, while they're doing this stuff, from there to there, and a lot of these boats out there these days, it's only a second or whatever. Rules 10, 11 and 12 don't apply. So we've turned those three rules off. We're only worried about who's now doing the tacking bit between beyond head to wind and close haul. During that time, 10, 11, 12 don't apply. Two boats on subject to the rule at the same time, one on the other's port side, or the one astern, should keep clear. That's usually not a problem. But just as an example, we had a scenario years ago. It was a Finn class Olympic trials on Port Phillip Bay. And there was a guy on starboard tack and had been on starboard tack for a while. Had come across. This guy on port tack came across and did that. He lodged a protest saying this guy had infringed this, what is now this rule. And this guy was a local. So he had a dinner date or something that he couldn't break, his wife would kill him and all that sort of stuff. So he didn't even come to the protest hearing. So we sat down thinking this is going to be easy. This guy gave us his evidence and said, I was coming along here, and this guy came here and I went and tagged him. Where is he? So we might need to turn that down a bit, if you'd be so kind. He said, I tagged. Why did you tag? Well, I didn't want to create an overlap through the two back veneers of his transom. Because fins tack and stop. Just stop. So he got out of the way. And we said, well, can you put those boats back? You've been on that tack for a while, yeah? Where was he when you tagged? He said, dead ahead of me. A foot away. So, and then you were able to keep clear? Yes. The only error this guy made was one of seamanship, an occasion where he may have needed Monty's blink. But he proved to us that this guy had complied with that rule. Right? He completed his tack, and this guy was thereafter able to keep clear. Not recommended, because that's one of the very few occasions where I've been involved in a protest like that, that indeed what's happened is, normally it's the story comes out like this. Well, I was on starboard tack and I'd been running along that tack for a while, and this guy came in here and got to here, and then, oh, gee, I had the tack, and he hadn't got the close or course yet. That's usually the story that we get. But in this case, error of judgment, no break of rule. But I don't recommend doing it. Acquiring right of way. If one acquires right of way, she shall initially, the word initially is important in this rule, initially give the other boat room to keep clear. Why is it only initial? Well, we don't want a boat to come into a position to get right of way and then be able to control the other boat completely. He's got to have an out. Once you've given him once you've acquired right of way, you've got to give him room to do something about getting out of your way and staying out of your way. So unless she acquires right of way because of the other boat's actions. Okay. Changing course. We used to just have the first bit of this rule, but the Americans couldn't understand English, so we then had to put the second bit in. When a right-of-way boat changes course, you shall give the other boat room to keep clear. We thought that was simple and easy and straightforward. And the rules writers twice went back to the ISAF Council who make the policy and said, you don't need any more, that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. But the Americans had this problem of boats, what they called hunting. I remember hunting when I was in BJ's years ago. That if a port-take boat crossed me, I would lift to try and get the bowsprit through the two back falls of his main sheet. I failed miserably every time, unfortunately. But that wasn't the hunting that they meant. What they were talking about when we really analysed it and we could write a rule about it, in addition, so it's an additional thing to the bit at the top. When after the starting signal the port-take boat is keeping clear by sailing to pass the stern of the starboard-take boat. In other words, I'm now heading off down here because I'm recognising that you're on starboard tack. Sorry, I can go up a bit higher if you want. I recognise you're on starboard tack and I have to keep clear of you in accordance with my first commandment up here. Then I'm doing what I can do to make everything right. The starboard tack boat shall not change course if as a result the port-take boat would immediately need to change course to continue keeping clear. So in other words, he's keeping clear, he's heading down behind you, and then suddenly you do that. Oh, I've got to alter course again, and therefore you've broken Rule 16.2. So the Americans in the end did us a service, I guess. Rule 16, altering course. This is a classic example where under the real old rules before 1996, you were allowed to change course if you were that yellow boat, and the blue boat had to anticipate that you might change course. Now we always reckoned that was dangerous. And particularly these days, you don't know where these guys are going downhill, whether they're going out of here, out of way, or down the middle, or anywhere in between. So Rule 16 applies to the starboard tack boat, who's round in row. Commodore's Cup, Captain went in 2000, I think. We were in a jury boat sitting just up here somewhere, and in front of us was a Spanish television crew filming this mark rounding process. And it was a Spanish boat that came round here and turned the wheel to go around the mark and kept the wheel on. And we could see from where we were that he made no attempt to change the rule back again, right? To straighten his course, even though he could see this port-take boat coming up. And because it's cows, right? This port-take boat came from way up here somewhere and the current took him down. And it's blown pretty hard. And they've got all their legs over the side. And how no one got injured in this incident, I really still don't understand. But we disqualified this guy for changing course and therefore preventing the port-take boat from keeping clear. Had he got position 2 and kept going, and then decided to take his course out this way, wouldn't have been a problem. But he altered course in front of the port-tack boat. And that's one situation, and there are others. How many times can you think of that the starboard tack boat doesn't always have rights? Alright, Dutch won't tell you either. If you can think of about 10, you're doing all right. I'm not going to tell you what they are, that's your homework for the week, no? Again, had this guy continued on and not changed course marginally here and more seriously here, he would have sailed astern of the port-tack boat and therefore wouldn't have broken Rule 16. Does that mean I'm saying that at times the starboard tack boat has right of way? Yes. He always has right of way. So this guy's still the port-tack boat, and the commandments still say that you've got to abide by them. But what this Rule 16 is doing is placing a limitation on what this right of way boat can do. He can't alter course if in doing so he prevents that guy from keeping clear. That's just for the heck of it. Show you a little toy we've got. So when you see me at a protest hearing, I've got my laptop out in front of me, I can be writing diagrams like this to show you at the end of your testimony that maybe what you're telling me couldn't have happened. In all the protests, I think, that I've dealt with over the years, and I'm sure John would agree, that there's very, very few times that we come out of there thinking someone's lying. We come out of there thinking people have seen things differently, and that's human nature. You ask somebody in an accident, where did that car come? I came out of that driveway. No, he didn't. He's been parked on the side of the road all day. And yet they genuinely believe that that was what the scenario is. So I can do this, and I can show you, step by step, that had you not gone in there, in other words, had you not changed course at that point, and more so there, you would have kept clear of it. You can.
In that first position, he's called starboard.
Yep.
Does that make
No. You don't have to call in. The question was, he's called starboard. Does it make any difference? And the answer is no. You can call whatever you like, but it doesn't mean anything. It's like, again, if I can use Paul Elstrom, Soling World's 74 up off Pittwater. Anytime he got a bad, looked like getting a bad start, he'd pull the main sheet on and shove half the fleet across the start line, and Jack Garland had to give a gentle recall, and we'd come back and start again. And after about 7 of these things, Jack was getting a bit fed up, and he said, I've got more beer than they've got, so I'm all right. But one of the things I looked at Paul's boat, and he had on his boom, he had GW on one side and RAW on the other. I said, what's all that mean? He said, well, as you know, he's Danish. As you know, he said, English is not my first language. And at times out there, someone comes and yells out, starboard, and I think, oh, it's on starboard. And I look at the boom and it says GW, I've got to give way. So I'm not on starboard. That's why he's good. The other thing I found, and just digressing from rules, but why these people get to where they are. His middleman had a china pencil in his boot. And any time they'd adjust something on the rig or so, they'd write it down, what they changed, what they adjusted. And then after 5 minutes or so, they'd work out whether it made it better or worse. So they'd write down good or bad or whatever. And on the other side of the line was a shopping list. So if something looked like it was breaking, we'll have a buy a new bit of that and fix that one. And his ambition or job in life when he got back to the beach was to write all these things down, put the shopping list in a shopping list book, and the details on rig and stuff in the rig book, and the performance book. And that's why these guys keep winning. attention to detail.
Sorry, can we just finish on that one? The yellow boat has to give the blue boat room. But the blue boat, does he no longer have to take away?
Well, the issue is, if I were at a blue boat, I wouldn't be there. Right? That's the first message, right? If in doubt, don't go in there. But you take up golf, yeah, good idea. The main thing is, all I'm trying to convey in this slide is that the right-of-way boat under Rule 16 has limitations on what he can do. Okay? If he alters course and in doing so prevents the port tack boat from keeping clear, right, the port tack boat can be exonerated. Okay? But it does not at any stage absolve him of his prime responsibility under the commandments. Okay? Yes, that's where you need Bondi's links. Okay, to prove that he did change course.
What's preventing the blue boat from changing course?
What prevents him from changing course?
Preventing him from changing course.
He can change course, he can do what he wants.
So then that's my question, how Rule 16 apply?
Rule 16 applies to the starboard tack boat. 16 applies to the right-of-way boat.
But wasn't the point that the yellow boat is preventing the blue boat from changing course? Or from keeping clear.
Keeping clear.
But how is the blue boat unable to keep clear? Can't he just tack?
Well, in that situation, he's got a mark in his road. He can wipe the mark out if he wants, or he could have tacked position 2. Right?
So the blue boat can take position 2.
It doesn't matter. Well, all we're trying to convey, and you can come with all the what ifs if you want in the world. The only thing I'm trying to convey here is that there is a restriction and a limitation on what the starboard tack boat can do. If he alters course and in doing so prevents the port tack boat from keeping clear, he's broken Rule 16. It's that simple. Any more questions, I'll have them at the end. I've had enough Rule 16. Okay. On the same tack, proper course, Rule 17. This caused us a bit of consternation a few years ago, and we had to put some words in to fix a problem that we didn't think existed. If a boat clear astern becomes overlapped within 2 of a hull lengths to leeward of a boat on the same tack, she shall not sail above her proper course. So there's 2 things. 2 of a hull length, her hull length, right? To leeward of a boat on the same tack, she shall not sail above her proper course, while they remain on the same tack and overlap within that distance. Some years ago we were heading off to Hobart, or so we thought, and a bigger boat came in from clear astern. We were down at Bondi somewhere. Came in and suddenly decided Auckland looked better option than Hobart, so and we're going, hey, you can't do that. You're now sailing above your proper course. Huh? What's that? Get out. Oh. So they drifted off. And we got clear ahead of them again. And then they came back again. As they're coming back into 2 boat lengths, we luffed a bit. So we broke the overlap. Then they were a boat establishing an overlap from clear astern again within the 2 hull lengths. So they were still amenable to that rule. So we yelled at them and broke the protest flag out and did all sorts of stuff. And somebody in his boat looked up and said, Christ, get out of the way, Mooney's on that. So they didn't. So we had that guy worried for 4 days until I ran into him at the bar and Roy got up to take money. And he said, what were you going on about? And I explained it to him. He said, oh, God, I wouldn't have even thought of that. And this promptly sails astern of the other boat. We had a case in a match race where a guy came in here, created the overlap from clear astern within the 2 hull lengths, and then decided he didn't want to be there anyway, so he tacked. And every time he did that, the other guy threw a flag up. And we're going, Green flag, green flag, green flag. What's he going on about? He said, every time he goes above close haul, he's breaking that rule. And indeed, when you thought about it, he was. It was a normal part of sailing that we didn't ever think of. So that's why we put this other bit in. Unless in doing so, she promptly sails astern of the other boat. So that's why those silly words are there, because of some idiot in a match race. This rule does not apply if the outlet begins while the windward boat is required by Rule 13 to keep clear. Okay. Definition of proper course. We just used the term in that last rule. A course a boat would sail to finish as soon as possible, in the absence of the other rates referred to in the rule using the term. It doesn't say you have to finish as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, or sail a course consistent with finishing as quickly as possible. You can sail all over the water, who cares? You mightn't win the boat race, but you're allowed to do it. There's only certain restrictions, as we've seen, and limitations on what you can or can't do. A boat has no proper course before her starting signal. So in this case, I am entitled to sail higher than close haul. On that side of the start line, my proper course would be close haul. Before the start, because there's no proper course before the start, I can sail as high as I want. And if that means I can jam you with a committee boat, not recommended, but that's why they keep putting some of them put what is probably called a distance marker out here. I call it an idiot buoy. To protect the race committee from the idiots, right? Definitions specifically relating to section C. We'll go through a couple of these and then we'll have a bit of a break. We used the term fetching in the rules before last, and a lot of people had problems understanding what fetching meant. Did it mean the dog fetching the paper in the morning, or what did it mean? It's fetching a mark when she's in a position to pass to windward of it and leave it on the required side without changing tacks. So it means if you are maybe having to pinch a bit to get to the mark, right, but you don't have to change tacks, you're fetching it. That's important as we go through this random mark scenario in a short while. Definition of mark route. This is a change. Major change is that you're no longer able by sailing instructions to vary the diameter of the zone. It's now 3 lengths. We gave everyone 4 years of looking at whether it could be, do you really need to make it 2 or 3 or 4? And we found the majority of the world's quite happy with 3. And that's why we've left it at 3, and no one can change it anymore. So that's the major change there. And apart from that, they've broken up the rule a bit to make it easier to understand. Room for a boat to leave a mark on the required spot. Also ruled the sail of a mark when a proper course is to sail close to it. In the old ones we had proper courses to it and after it, and when you're at the mark you have to do something else. Even I couldn't understand what it meant. So now I can. It's simplified quite a lot. And roomed around the mark is necessary to sail the course. So I'm allowed now to come to the in tight to a mark, or I'm allowed to come out from the mark and then come in tight to it, or tactical rounding of it is what it used to be called. To sail to the mark when a proper course is to sail close to it. That's my proper course, to sail close to it. I'll fix this at interval. And roomed around the mark is necessary to sail the course. So you've got to have room. Now with mark room for a boat does not include room to tack unless she's able to have inside in the windward. The boat required to be mark room. This has been one of my pets for years. On the week to windward, I've always maintained that I've had room to round that mark. If that means room to tack, it means room to tack. Now it does say that. But I have room to tack. Because what happens in practice, once you go beyond head to wind,
you're then on opposite tack. So Rule 18 is turned off. Because then they're boats on opposite tacks, not boats on the same tack, required to round the mark in the same way. So now what they've done here is fix that problem by saying round the mark is necessary. Mark room for a boat does not include room to tack unless, so if she's up here, in other words, clear ahead, she hasn't got room to tack. So if you want to tack around that mark, you'd better do it gently. And make sure that you give this guy plenty of notice that he's going to have to get away from it. It's only when there's overlap inside and to windward the mark required to give the room. There's an example. This guy has room to round the mark. He's got room to tack around the mark because he can tack and lay the mark, fetch it. And that part of the rule allows him to do that, and the outside boat has to give him room to do so. Definition zone, we talked about that. It's now 3 hull lengths and nothing can change. Definition of obstruction. An object of boat could not pass without changing course substantially if she was sailing directly towards it and 1 length. That doesn't mean to say that you've got to be 1 length away before something's an obstruction. All this is doing is defining what is the order that is the obstruction. An object that can safely pass on one side only in an area so designated by the sailing instructions, they're also obstruction. Like our corridor for the starboard city harbour. Boat racing is not an obstruction to other boats unless they are required to keep clear of it, or if Rule 23, that's capsized, applies avoid it. A vessel underway, including a boat racing, is never a continuing obstruction.